What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Revit video. In this video, we're going to look at exporting PDFs as opposed to printing. Well, you might say, what the heck? We're always going to print PDFs, of course. Well, as of Revit 2022, we are not. Actually, we are not anymore. And this is a good thing. So before we get into it, if at any point in this video you happen to learn something, which I sure hope you do, yeah, that's kind of why you're here, right? Please demolish that like button. It really, really helps me out. Okay. Getting into it now, we are looking at not printing but exporting PDFs. Ooh, where can we find this? Well, a very similar place as before. Not necessarily the print icon here, but file. And you would normally think print because that's what we're used to. Let's actually look at this for a second. We actually have the same stuff, the exact same stuff that we could do here. All of the same kind of printing properties, whatever. But what I particularly love about Revit 2022 is that we can export PDFs. Look, creates PDF files. Ooh, it's not just used for CAD files or the random image. I mean, my gosh, I've done that like 3 times. Export PDFs. Cool, let's click on this. So immediately, there's a lot here. And by a lot here, I mean, there's a lot that we have in this one dialog window. And, when we really get into it, it's going to look very similar to what we're used to seeing in the print dialog windows. And so the cool thing here is that it's one giant thing. I guess that's a good thing, but it's at least compressed in a way where it's all in one place, which is really nice. That's useful at least. And so there's less confusion that way. There's not multiple windows, this or that. And so, okay, let's start at the top. As we go through this, my guess is that you'll be pretty used to seeing these types of things, like you would see in the print dialog. Okay. So the first thing, export range. Range is in not like, the range of sheets or anything like this, but like what are we literally looking at? Well, we know we've seen this before, current window or visible portion of current window. And then finally, we can select multiple views and sheets or whatever. So we know what the current window is. It's the entire view, of course. And then visible, because I have this zoomed all the way out to see the whole floor plan, this would look exactly the same. And then finally, we have selected views and sheets. Now, in session is I can just choose them as I go in the session, but this isn't going to do a lot right now until I come to the pencil, the edit. And so this is another dialog window. I know this is another one, and there will be a couple more of these, but the fact is that these are very simple one-offs, and they're not like one other giant window that has a bunch of different settings. This is specifically for selecting views and sheets. And so right now it's in session, and like in session it's just like I don't want to actually save anything. I just want to like choose these and then move on, choose these and then move on. Well, that's great, but the whole point of this is that we can make these presets, and we could have always done this. I will say it now that everything that you see within the PDF export window is actually nothing new when it comes to getting PDFs printed or export, however you want to put it. It's more streamlined. It's all in one place, and it's going to save you a little bit of time based on all of that. And you'll see how in the end. So we do want to actually make, so let's go ahead and call this, SD set. If we want to, get an SD set out, I have really just a few plans here. So in an SD set, I might put level 1, 2, a site plan. I probably want to put in this RCP construction, and then, I might put in a 3D view or 2, things like that. And that's great. Cool. These are just views. Now, of course, I can come down here and choose sheets. But the filter here is really cool too, because I can choose 2D views. I don't want to see that. I can uncheck 2D views if I don't want to see those at all. I can uncheck 3D views if I don't want those, or sheets. And, it's a nice way of filtering. And this doesn't remove the sheets. It just filters them out from what you can see, which is important. Now, something else I love is that there's actually a preview. Maybe you just got on this project and you were told to export something, a whole set. Well, you need to make sure what you're looking at is it makes sense, or it's correct, or something like that, or it makes sense to actually export that view. Well, it may not make sense to export a lot of these views that I am, but nonetheless, it's okay. So the preview is great, and it really is nice to have that as an option. So what we've done here is we have chosen the actual files that we want. We can actually select all of them or none of them. In this case, I only have like 3 sheets, so maybe it's just these 3 sheets that go into my SD set. That's all we care about, right? These 3. It's a really simple house. Nothing's going on. So with that said, I want to actually save this. I can, select more. That's great. But, I actually want to save this as a part of my SD set. So if I come to in session, you can see it's, I don't have any checked. I would have to go through and, recheck those. Whereas if I come to my SD set, boom, I see absolutely everything that's here. And if I wanted to see more or add more, I'd have to uncheck this hide unchecked views. So we can see it just hides them all. Great. Maybe I want to add this other 3 view. Great. I don't really want to, but that's fine. But then if I wanted to, I'd have to click save. So cool. I have that SD set. And I can always come back in here and edit that if I need to. But again, we've seen this kind of thing before. That's nothing too special. Okay, moving on down to export setup. Again, we see an in session. Well, what is this telling me? What's going on here? Well, the only option I have here with it is to save as. And so I'm actually going to move beyond this at this time and look at all the other settings, and we'll come back to this. So the file name. This is all very familiar. We know what this is. Sample house, and then maybe SD. Cool, easy. And then my location is, sure, doesn't matter. I like that I can combine them. Of course, we've seen this before, but it's a simple checkbox. If I want to combine them into one single PDF, then I literally have the name right here, sample house SD. Now, if I choose to not, then I can see, all right, well, we have some different things here. And this is what is actually new when it comes to this PDF export option. And I love this because a lot of times, well, I would say almost most of the time when I'm issuing a set, it's going to be of each individual sheet as their own PDF file. And that's just because it's not one giant set, one, and two, likely you're going to have to go through each individually and confirm that they're all in the set and whatever. And usually you'd give them to the contractor as just those single PDFs per sheet, which is great. Now, the coolest part is when it comes to exporting as single sheets. And we know we have them as single sheets whenever my file name is grayed out and I can't do anything. But we get this new awesome icon here, which is, there's a lot here. And, if you've edited, parameters, labels, things like that, you're kind of familiar with this interface and how things work here. And the parameters we're looking at in particular are views. So in theory, we could add our own and go through all this kind of stuff, whatever, but that's not really what I care about. This is really all about getting the format of the naming of each individual PDF file that you will ultimately end up exporting. And so the idea is what is the formula? And I hate to use formula because that makes it sound advanced, but what are the different parameters of what you want to see? And so typically the way I'm used to doing it, which there's 100 ways to do it, but typically the way I'm used to doing it is that I would have the sheet number followed by like a dash, and then the sheet name, and that's kind of it. That probably is enough. And then I ultimately have everything sorted by sheet number. Now, this becomes all dependent on how you number and name your sheets and name, whatnot. So we want to actually find a way to get this working for us. So these are all the parameters that we can work with for naming those files. So the first thing here, we have type, and that's not really doing much for me at this point. So I'm just going to blank all these out and bring all these out. I don't really care about view name because I want to look more towards the sheets. At least me, I'm primarily going to use this to export sheets. And if I'm not exporting sheets, then I don't really care. Like, I'm not issuing that. It's not official or whatever. The name can be just anything. But when it comes to sheets, it's official. So I want to work with the sheet number, of course. That's going to be the first thing I want. So I want to bring that in. And so my sheet number, maybe it's A0.01, whatever. That's fine. So that's going to be what it starts with. And then I actually do want to keep that separator of a dash. But then, like I said before, I want to have my sheet name. And so there it is. I have my sheet number, and then I have my dash sheet name. And I don't need a separator here because I have nothing after that. And so there we go. And so we can see the preview value here is sheet number dash sheet name. Great. Now, we can always do this like before. I said if we have our sheet there, this is just an example. And then we have site plan. I would probably capitalize site plan. There we go. And so that's literally what it looks like. Now maybe what I want to do is, instead of having just a dash between the end of the sheet number and sheet name, maybe I want like a space dash space, which I typically like to see. Gives it a little more buffer between them, and you can read them a little easier. Cool. I like that. So that's going to be something you have to edit. But nonetheless, this is really simple, and it allows you to use almost any of these types of parameters to literally build the name out into your specific sheet number, sheet name, everything. That whole name of the sheet, the single sheet, is going to get this name. And maybe I would do something completely different if it weren't actually sheets. If it were some part of an SD package and it's just views or whatever, I would maybe add new parameters for that, whatever. That's fine. But because I primarily are issuing sheets, obviously, I want to have them named appropriately, correctly based on this. Something I've seen a lot of times is, depending on the compiler you used to print, whether it's through like Adobe or Bluebeam or a Qt PDF, like there's tons of different kinds of printers, compilers, whatever you want to call it. And depending on how those particular compilers read your sheet number, it might be that your A0.01 becomes A-01 or anything like that. It kind of messes it up, changes it up a bit. Now, with this method and using this export through Revit itself, you're never going to have anything that's inconsistent anymore. You're going to get the exact same, and it's going to be the exact value that you put as the sheet number, which is fantastic. That's what we want. We want consistency here. And so the idea is that if anyone's exporting from the actual PDF exporter in Revit, you don't have to worry about that at all, because this is what would happen. I would print a portion of the set, someone else would print a portion. We'd use different compilers, and we'd get different sheet numbers, dash sheet names, like just very little differences in that, the dots, a dash or something, but that messes up the sheet order potentially, things like that. So this is great. This is what we want. We'll press OK, and we're good. We can see that everything here is populating. We have by file name is sheet number dash sheet name. Wonderful. Now, of course, if I combine these all into a single PDF again, that will no longer appear because it'll just be that one name, but that's great. All right, now moving on down to size. We've seen similar things to this in the print dialog that we're used to seeing in Revit. Now, when it comes to the page size, that's a bit, obviously this is, the same. We can pick the actual size of the sheet that we're using, but what we are actually now able to do is just use the sheet size by here, like right here by default. I have not changed this at all. And the reason I love this, is because I might go between, very rarely do I do this, but a lot of times I'll go from 30 by 42 to like an SD set being maybe 11 by 17, things like that. And if that's the case, having this as use sheet size means I can have multiple sheets that are different sizes in my exact same print export, yet they actually export as those different sizes, which is, that's awesome. I love that idea. And even regardless, even if I'm printing all the same 11 by 17 sizes, I don't want to have to come in here and say, let's actually change this to 11 by 17. I don't need to do that. Like per print, I can just leave it at use sheet size. Now, obviously, if you have some issue that pops up, this is something to keep an eye on, because maybe what Revit thinks is the sheet size, it actually is not. It's kind of up to you. We'll see. Now, a lot of times with that, I would want to zoom to 100% just to make sure I don't have things off of the page that might be altering the size of the print based on fitting that to the page, basically fitting everything on the page versus keeping everything within the page, the sheet itself, the template, everything, the size. So a lot of times what I would do as like a good default when it comes to printing and exporting sheets is the zoom to 100%, but making sure I have the size. But in this case, the size is basically taken care of. And then the placement center is great. Basically, I only have this option if I choose an actual size. I can offset for some reason if I want to, after I've chosen a specific, super specific size for my page. Now, like I said, I don't care about the size until it's wrong, of course, but assuming Revit gets it right, use sheet size, that becomes the center. Perfect, that's what I want, zoom 100%, ding, ding, ding. My orientation becomes automatic, why? Well, that, again, has everything to do with the sheet size. The fact that the sheet size it's just basically responding to the way Revit has it. I've set that up in the sheet already, like in the template and all that. I don't have to worry about that because it's already done. And the fact that Revit, this export, is reading that PDF size, that sheet size, and orientating it that based on whatever the sheet is, then that's taken care of too. You can see as I change this to something else, not only does my paper placement have more options, but my orientation, I can literally specify that. And if I want to force it, or if it's wrong or something, I might have to do that, of course. So putting that on use sheet size is going to save you a lot of time, effort, and likely some headaches. And then appearance, and both appearance and create outline using vectors or rasters. These are things we've seen before. Obviously, if you want to raster at all, this raster quality will have no impact unless you have raster processing on. So just be aware of that. And then raster quality is high. It doesn't matter. Make sure it's at least high, probably, so you can really see the detail. And then if you want to print in color or black lines, grayscale, that's up to you. But I typically do vector because I'm not trying to export some beautiful rendering out of my Revit file as like on a sheet or something like that. So, And then finally, these options. We're very used to seeing these. We're also likely very used to not checking or unchecking any of them, keeping them default because that's what I'd recommend. So let's see here. View links in blue, and this is for color prints. Now, if you want to delineate in your Revit actual sheet and on your export what is a link, you can have that show up in blue by default. Easy. I don't necessarily want to do that because I have links in for a reason, which is not to differentiate it from my actual Revit project, but to go with it. I can hide reference work planes. Yeah, I definitely want to do that, especially because I'm not making those most of the time, and if I do, I'm usually not showing them in my views unless I need them. So oftentimes I do not want those to print ever. Unreferenced tags. I definitely want to hide those unreferenced view tags because I guarantee you there's a ton of times people are making, working elevation sections. They're not on a sheet and you don't want them to print. You don't want that blank tag to show up as like, well, whenever I see that printed, I'm thinking, well, this person's not done working. They're like, this project is not done. The set that you're issuing isn't really done yet. So I like to hide unreferenced view tags. That's the only thing I would change here by default. The region, edges, mask, coincident lines, that's kind of up to you. It's where you have the regions of the edges of mask overlapping multiple lines of others. Kind of up to you. Not a big deal. I tend to keep that unchecked because I don't really care to see that. Hiding scope boxes. That's a good one. Definitely hide scope boxes. This is basically along the same lines as unreferenced view tags and reference work planes because, and then here finally crop boundaries. I can't imagine you ever want to see the edge of a view on a sheet, or even if it's not on a sheet, it's just seeing the edge of the view. It'll bring up questions like, what is this? What is that? And then finally, this is kind of interesting. I could see a use for this, but I've never done it. Replace halftone with thin lines. So if you don't want to actually see the gray from a halftone, you can instead just make those thin lines. I would probably only do that if I tend to, let's say, work thicker, or if my project's really small and I have lots of thicker lines and don't really want to see gray at all. If I want to see only black. Note that you will not see any gray when it comes to lines, if assuming you halftone those. They will become thin lines. That's all it is. So with all of this to say, we have looked at all of the different settings here, but one other, and that is this export setup. So if I'm happy with all of my settings here by default, I can actually save this. So I'm going to save this as, and again, we had all of this in the previous print dialog. It's nothing that crazy. So I might just do literally just sheet or sheets. This is literally, these properties are for sheets. And maybe I'll have another one for views where it ignores, or maybe I have one for like a specific SD set where maybe all of my SD sets are going to be 11 by 17 regardless. And maybe I definitely want them to be portrait regardless of anything else because I'm just working with views. I don't know. There's a lot that we could go into, and you can of course make a ton more of these different exports. I can always rename this or delete it. And then in session will allow me to go back to, I guess, what you would call a default setting for this particular, export dialog. If I go to sheets, you can see immediately back to what I had before. Everything below this point is completely different. It's everything that involves the sheets. It's all saved here. Now, everything above is actually unchanged. So typically speaking, if I do sheets, I probably want to select an actual set here to export from. I take these settings that I've called sheets, and then I apply those to all of these different views or sheets. In this case, sheets that I've applied, and then I'm good. So I can export this, and here we go. The naming rule cannot be applied to the selected views or sheets. This is very interesting. Use parameter name for the missing values. Default value is when exporting PDF files. Okay, or I can literally just return to this if I want, and I'm gonna go investigate my SD set, and yeah, they're all sheets. Cool. So I'm gonna export this and just use parameter name. And once this exports, we can have a look at what these files look like. So we're getting this error, I guess we could say. The naming rule cannot be applied to the selected views or sheets. Use parameter name for the missing value. So this is a bit weird. So this is telling me that I have an issue with some of the parameters that I've set up through this file name. And so let's investigate what that might be. Well, immediately I can see the issue has to do with this parameter type. So this parameter type is views. And so if we're familiar with the parameter types of views, it may or may not have a sheet number or sheet name, and that is dependent on whether or not that view is on a sheet. Of course, well, okay. With that said, what we really want to care about is sheets. Of course, this is, of course, if you're printing sheets only, or at least let's say you definitely have sheets. In this case, we definitely want to do sheets. And so this is why I was talking about having more of a, I guess you would say, template file for printing or exporting sheets versus views, instead of having to just kind of try and mix it all together and make it work. I'd have one and then the other, just in general. But as we scroll down the sheets parameter type, things are starting to make a little more sense, and that's because we're looking at sheets and we actually see a sheet number, sheet name for parameters when it comes to actually sheets. So think about this, and I'll show you here in just a second, but let's go ahead and rebuild this with the sheet parameter type, and I'll show you in a second when we get out of here what's going on. So again, sheet number is first and then followed by sheet name. We want to make sure our separator is space dash space, and then we don't want a separator after that, after the sheet name. So there we go, looks good. So we want okay, great. And so I am going to go ahead and make sure we save that over so we have sheets, and I'm going to close this. So let me show you here. We are in the sheet, and you can see the sheet is site plan. And if I scroll down, we can see their sheet number and my actual sheet number, and then my sheet name, site plan. That's what it is. We wanted to see that. So it should be A1.00 space dash space site plan. Cool. That's what we want. Now, let's come into view, this actual view of the site plan. I can come down here and I can see, all this looks fairly normal. Yes, but look at this. I happen to see sheet number and then sheet name. So this is for the actual view, and this is saying, okay, that is the sheet number and sheet name that the view is on. Well, we were basically looking towards these parameters on the sheet, even though we were printing sheets. So we were looking at the views, the parameters on the view itself were for views as opposed to those for sheets, and actually on the sheet itself. So my guess now, and my hope now, honestly, is that whenever we go to export these PDFs, we will not have that bit of an issue. So export here, and hey, look, as far as I can tell, no error. That's what we want. Cool. So these are in export, and let's go confirm that. Now, would you look at that? These files, they worked. Boom. Look at that. That's great. That's what I want. I've got a blank sheet, but that's fine. It fit the exact size of the sheet. That's exactly what I want. Very cool stuff. I mean, I'm happy with that. That is exactly what I wanted. So that's cool. Now, my only knock when it comes to this export is that there's no shortcut to it. We're used to printing with this print icon, and not only that, we could press Control P, because Control P for printing works everywhere. I wish Control E worked, but there's one place we can check and maybe make Control E actually do something. In this case, export instead of print. our sheets, our views, anything. So let's go up here to File, Options, and then come down to User Interface, and then Keyboard Shortcuts and Customize. Well, because I have no idea what we're looking for, my guess is it's a PDF. So I'm just going to search PDF. Look at this. Look at this. In the paths here, Application Menu, Export. That's what we want. So the shortcut is not set. So let's go ahead and press new keys. Control E. There's my Control E. I'm going to assign it. Hello. Look at this. Press OK. There we go. So now I'm in here and I press Control E. Boom. Yes. We're happy now. You know, we have a shortcut for exporting to PDF. It's sad that that's the happiest I felt all day, but you know, that's my own issue. Now with that, I think that's kind of it. We've covered everything here. We have looked at this export range. Basically all of this is the exact same, apart from the naming specific files. So be aware of that. That's new. Everything else we've looked at in the print dialog before. That's all normal, but now it's all compressed. It's in one nice place. It's export instead of print, kind of what it is. So that's it. That's good. So with that said, if you happen to learn something, which I hope you did, and my guess is that you might have, come on here. Or if you just like the video, please demolish that like button. It really, really helps me out a lot. And I appreciate, really, really do, all who have done that. So again, that'll do it for this video. Have a wonderful day. I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching.